MTR to dig up platforms at Hong Hom Station as it investigates allegations of shoddy construction work. Chaos at Carrie Lam's Q&A as lawmakers protest Eddie Chu's disqualification. And local shares drop sharply amid renewed Sino-US trade fears.
Good evening. The MTRC announced today it will open up dozens of spots at the troubled Hong Hom Station extension. The goal is to inspect steel bars and couplers as part of a probe into allegations of shoddy construction. Sharon Tang has our top story.
In May this year, allegations spread around town regarding steel bars that were cut short at the Hong Hom Station extension. Amid the ongoing judge-led inquiries and submission of reports, the Highways Department today accepted the MTRC's proposal to perform physical investigations, considering it a scientific way to identify the problems. The holistic study consists of 3 different stages. First, engaging external engineering consultants to check design amendment drawings against construction records. The MTRC claims this stage is mostly complete. Second, opening up 80 spots at various locations on the new platforms for the East-West Corridor and the North-South Corridor to verify the as-construction condition. This would facilitate the inspection of workmanship of at least 168 steel bars and couplers connections. An MTRC manager stressed the selection of the locations is entirely random.
As I explained earlier, this is a completely random selection process, which is not controlled by MTR nor a government in this case. It's actually a complete random process administered by the Hong Kong University. Now, both the random sampling and the statistical analysis are well-founded and accepted international practices.
Finally, structural assessment and remedial actions will be taken depending on the findings from the previous 2 stages. For now, the rail giant says preparatory works are underway, such as the removal of tracks and railway facilities. It also hopes opening up investigations could commence as soon as next Monday. The MTRC is expecting the verification tests and reinstatement works to take at least 16 weeks to complete, adding it may take more time if further sampling and tests are required. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Chaos at the chief executive's Q&A session at LegCo today, which ended abruptly without Carrie Lam answering any questions. Pan Democrats staged a noisy protest over lawmaker Eddie Chu's disqualification from a village election. Christy Leung has that story.
Protests over Eddie Chu's disqualification continued this morning as the Chief Executive's question and answer section at LegCo.
Members, please stop shouting. If you continue to shout, I'm going to order you to leave the chamber.
Despite repeated warnings, the chants continued. The President promptly ordered the Pan Democrats convener Claudia Mo, as well as Eddie Chu and Ray Chan, to leave the chamber. Leung suspended the meeting as the trio refused to leave. The session resumed around 15 minutes later, as did the chantings.
Because many members are still shouting, the CE's question time cannot proceed. The Chief Executive's question time ends here.
For the first time, the Chief Executive left the chamber with no answering any questions since taking office in 2017.
If you look at the recordings, you will see I have given enough warnings. Rules of procedure are very clear, how members should behave.
The chaos prompted calls from the pro-establishment lawmakers to change LegCo's rules of procedures.
We treasure the time to raise questions to the Chief Executive. We really need to review and revise the rules and procedures to ensure that we will have a smooth and civilized meeting in the future.
The Pan-Democrats fought back.
The so-called behaving is turning the legislative chamber into the National People's Congress. They want us to be all just rubber stamp bodies and hand-raising machines.
The committee reviewing the set of rules said the incident would not affect its works.
We're not really in a hurry to expedite anything. We've been doing a study on the relevant background materials, including the comparative measures taken by other parliamentary systems elsewhere for a long, long time.
Chief Executive Carrie Lam said it is a pity that the session was called off, hoping that it would go smoothly next time. Christy Lung, TVB News.
A memorial was held in Xingyi today for the 6 people who died in last Friday's crash. The ceremony was held this morning on the Chengxing Highway. Several lanes were closed during the proceedings. Meanwhile, Transport Department officials met with representatives of non-franchise coach operators to talk about safety issues. One representative said there are approximately 7,000 coaches in Hong Kong with seatbelts installed in about half of them. It would be difficult to have all coaches fitted with seatbelts as it would be too expensive.
Asian stocks, including those in Hong Kong, sank today. The slump followed Wall Street's lead amid confusion about Washington and Beijing agreed to in the tariff ceasefire. Alan Booknia has more.
Investor confidence in the U.S.-China agreement faltered after confusing and conflicting comments from U.S. President Donald Trump and senior officials. That revived fears that the tariff battle could chill global economic growth. Trump said last weekend's meeting with President Xi Jinping would lead to sales of American farm goods and cuts in Chinese auto tariffs, but Beijing has yet to confirm that. Yesterday, Trump renewed threats of tariff hikes over Twitter. The Dow Jones lost 3.1% to close at 25,027. The Nasdaq dropped 3.8%, and the S&P lost 3.2%.
We had what appeared to be some good progress on China trade dispute. That is now in question. Another thing that happened last week was we got a signal from the Federal Reserve that interest rates might not be increasing as fast. Now there's a little bit more doubt about that too.
Hong Kong stock analyst Francis Lun said movements in interest rates are also to blame.
The short-term interest rate, the 3-year Treasury yield, rose above the 10-year Treasury yield. This is, in technical terms, it's called the inverted yield curve, where the short-term rate is higher than the long-term rate. And this usually augurs a period of economic recession. And because of this, and the market took the cue and then started to sell off.
The Hang Seng Index dropped 1.6% to close at 26,819. The Ministry of Commerce tried to reassure investors today. It said China is confident of implementing the issues agreed by Presidents Xi and Trump in Buenos Aires. Still, the Shanghai Composite Index slumped 0.6% to 2,649. Markets across the region were also lower. In Seoul, the Kospi dropped 0.8%, and in Japan, the Nikkei lost 0.5% to close at 21,919. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
Senior U.S. senators are reacting with outrage after a CIA briefing on the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. They say there is no doubt Saudi Arabia's crown prince was involved in the killing.
There's not a smoking gun, there's a smoking saw. You have to be willfully blind not to come to the conclusion that this was orchestrated and organized by people under the command of MBS, and that he was intricately involved in the demise of Mr. Khashoggi.
I have zero question in my mind that the Crown Prince, MBS, ordered the killing, monitored the killing, knew exactly what was happening, planned it in advance. If he was in front of a jury, he would be convicted in 30 minutes, guilty.
The kingdom has been adamant the crown prince was not involved in the reporter's death. U.S. President Donald Trump has said there is no clear evidence connecting the crown prince with the crime.
A French environmentalist is criticizing the French government for not providing a proper transition when it tried to introduce a controversial fuel tax this year. The French Prime Minister has announced a suspension of the tax and utility hikes in an effort to appease a protest movement that plunged Paris into chaos last weekend.
Shows that the government needs to consult. The government needs to put in place social measures to make sure that this transition is fair and just, and to make sure that the French are not going against the climate action because they feel it's unfair. The carbon tax is critical for climate action because it is a price signal that shows that we can't continue now to be dependent on fossil fuel. We can't continue with gasoline and fossil fuel and diesel vehicles to be dependent on this trap of poverty.
And still to come in our newscast, former head of Catholic Church in Hong Kong testifies on behalf of Occupy co-founders. Former U.S. National Security Advisor could be spared jail over testimony and cooperation with Russia meddling probe. And British government suffers humiliating loss on opening day of key Brexit debate.
OK 啊列，無論幾攰，每次你哋放工，返到嚟呢個二人世界，就即刻唔同晒。為家人，有時都會喺出面受下氣。好在我唔會俾氣你受，仲識得將蒸氣回收，保存飯味，為你哋帶嚟家嘅味道。真正飯味，30電機 IH 電飯煲。
Welcome back to Pearl News. Lawyers for the Occupy co-founders called in a former Catholic bishop to testify at their public nuisance trial today. The court heard how a commitment to non-violence kept protesters from losing control even after police fired tear gas. Haley Joe has more.
Cardinal Joseph Zen has been an outspoken supporter of the 2014 Occupy movement. Zen said in modern societies, civil disobedience is widely recognized as a moral act of responsible citizens. He also said many Catholics in Hong Kong's legal profession agreed to the civil disobedience protest at the time and were willing to accept the legal consequences. Zen joined the Occupy trio on December 3, 2014 in surrendering to the police. Zen also told the court he really admired the trio, saying they were even more devoted to God than himself. They invited him to pray together for no more violence. Zen said the trio's year-long promotion of non-violence prevented protesters losing control, even when police fired tear gas at them. That's what the defense is trying to prove to the court. The use of tear gas by police brought more citizens to the movement, not the trio's incitement. A public survey conducted during the movement showed 83.5% said tear gas was the reason for their participation. The survey was conducted by Francis Lee, the director of the School of Journalism and Communication at Chinese University. The prosecution challenged the evidence, saying a public survey result cannot accurately prove the public's state of mind. The court was adjourned earlier than usual today at 3:10 p.m. as the judge needed time to make a decision on the admissibility of this new evidence. The hearing will resume at 2:30 p.m. tomorrow. Haley Joe, TVB News.
The police watchdog has dismissed worries regarding how many serious allegations it has fully or partially substantiated. Its latest annual report showed a significant increase in these cases. Caleb Bloom has details.
Neglect of duty, assault, as well as misconduct, improper manner, and offensive language. These are the major complaints from the around 2,870 allegations endorsed by the Independent Police Complaints Council in its 2017-18 report. Around 1,450 allegations were related to neglect of duty, which is more than half of total allegations endorsed. The IPCC classified 68 of the cases as substantiated, a nearly 39% year-on-year increase. Among the substantiated other than reported, and not fully substantiated cases, 12 were serious allegations or allegations involving disciplinary proceedings. That's a year-on-year increase of 50%. Despite an increase in serious allegations against the force, the police watchdog is not too worried about the situation.
I think we have to look at that in context, in a wider perspective. And serious allegations, in fact, have decreased in the last 10 years from over 1,000 to much less at the moment. That trend I believe is continuing. So 1 year's result may not be indicative of an overall trend.
The IPCC did express concern about the improper use of mobile phones, with 15 complaints received over the past year. It has recommended that the police amend their guidelines regarding the use of personal mobile phones, as well as explain the guidelines to officers. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Overseas again, it looks like U.S. President Donald Trump's former national security advisor will be spared jail time. Michael Flynn provided so much information to the special counsel's Russia investigation. Prosecutors say he shouldn't spend any time behind bars. Peter Koveas has details.
A court filing by special counsel Robert Mueller claimed Michael Flynn spoke at length to prosecutors. They talked 19 different times regarding the Russia probe.
This was by far the most extensive account of Michael Flynn's cooperation since he pleaded guilty in December 2017 to lying to the FBI about conversations that he had with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the transition period.
Flynn is the first of 5 Trump associates to accept responsibility by pleading guilty to lying to the FBI about conversations with Russia's former ambassador.
Flynn had basically encouraged Kislyak to not retaliate for sanctions that were imposed by the Obama administration for election hacking. Flynn was interviewed soon after Trump was sworn into office on January 24th, 2017, and during that interview, FBI agents asked Michael Flynn, "Did you discuss sanctions with the ambassador?" Flynn said he did not, and that formed the basis of a material lie to the FBI. And Flynn quickly admitted to that and then pleaded guilty.
Flynn's crime of lying to the FBI carries a statutory maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. He's scheduled to be sentenced December 18th. But his plea agreement states he's eligible for a sentence of 0 to 6 months. Flynn was President Trump's former national security advisor, but only held the role for 24 days. He's the only member of the Trump administration to plead guilty during Mueller's probe into alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 election. The Russian government has denied the claim. Donald Trump himself has repeatedly denied colluding with Russia, calling the probe a witch hunt. Peter Koveas, TVB News.
British Prime Minister Theresa May suffered embarrassing defeats on the first of 5 days of debate over her Brexit deal with the EU. May wants to secure Parliament's approval for her deal. It calls for keeping close ties with the European Union after leaving next March, but the opposition is fierce. Yesterday, her government was found to be in contempt of Parliament for not releasing the full script of legal advice on the Brexit deal. Then her own Conservative Party lawmakers won a challenge to hand more power to the House of Commons if her deal is voted down. And advice from a senior EU legal aide that Britain has a right to withdraw its Brexit notice unilaterally increased calls for a second referendum, something May opposes.
What it would say about the state of our democracy if the biggest vote in our history were to be rerun because a majority in this House didn't like the outcome. And what it would do to that democracy and what forces it would unleash. This House voted to give the decision to the British people. This House promised we would honour their decision. If we betray that promise, how can we expect them to trust us again?
People from all walks of life filed through the Capitol Rotunda in Washington to view the casket of George H.W. Bush. America's president from 1989 to 1993. Bush died Friday at the age of 94. Political combatants set aside their differences to honor a Republican who led a less toxic era and at a time found commonalities with Democrats. After a funeral service later today in Washington, Bush will be returned to Houston for burial. And that is a wrap of our news.
Good night.